Should the Mueller report be released while you're abroad next week?
That'll be totally up to the new Attorney General.
The woman from Alabama who left to join ISIS and marry an Islamic State fighter will not be getting her wish to return to the United States.
The FBI's former top attorney wanted to charge Hillary Clinton.
He was basically given a binder with the classified emails, with documents. He was appalled. He didn't see any other way around it.
Former 60 Minutes correspondent journalist Lara Logan bravely stating what so many people already know.
If there are any journalists who are not beating the same drum and giving the same talking points.
Hey, thank you very much for joining us. We've got a really busy 3 hours. It starts right now with this story. Straight to a Fox News alert. Empire actor Jussie Smollett is now a suspect in the alleged hate crime against himself. He lied to cops.
The actor charged with filing a false report with Chicago police, which could send him to prison if he is found guilty.
All right, Matt Finn has been all over this. He has not been sleeping. He is there in Chicago where Smollett will face a judge, but he didn't show up yesterday, right, Matt?
No, last check with Chicago police late last night, he had not turned himself in. At this hour, no word yet that he has surrendered. His attorneys are aware of these charges. Right now, Jussie Smollett has to turn himself into police, be arrested, and then appear in bond court. Chicago police detectives testified. They presented evidence to a grand jury, and the attorneys for those two brothers, the Osundaro brothers, say they testified for 2.5 hours before the grand jury, before charges were approved. Police say the brothers were caught on surveillance in the area the night of the attack. CBS News reports they confessed to the alleged hoax, and new surveillance video apparently shows the brothers purchasing supplies, including black masks and red hats. The attorney for those two brothers say they do not have a plea deal, but would not expand on why the brothers got involved with the alleged scheme.
I think Jussie Smollett should come clear because the truth will set him free. I think that Jussie's conscience is probably not letting him sleep right now, so I think he should unload that conscience and just come out and tell the American people what actually happened.
Smollett's attorneys released a statement reading, quote, "Like any other citizen, Mr. Smollett enjoys the presumption of innocence, particularly when there has been an investigation like this one, where information, both true and false, has been repeatedly leaked. Given these circumstances, we intend to conduct a thorough investigation and to mount an aggressive defense." The attorney and Chicago police say right now there are no charges expected for the two Osundaro brothers. Brian, Ainsley, Steve.
That's interesting stuff. All right, Matt, thank you very much. So 1:30 this afternoon in Chicago, he will go before that judge for the bond hearing. Police, ultimately it comes down to he filed a false police report alleging he was a victim of a hate crime. Doesn't look like that's real. What is real, though, is he is lawyered up. He has now hired Mark Garagos to defend him in Chicago.
Against this Class 4 felony. The potential punishments for this felony disorderly conduct charge: imprisonment for 1 to 3 years, could also receive probation and up to $25,000 in fines.
Meanwhile, just to refresh your memory, if you don't follow Empire or you didn't know who this guy was a couple of weeks ago, remember what he accused of happening to him. Remember what he said. Remember the potential, if this had been true, maybe even race riots in major cities across this country. Here's what he claimed to Good Morning America on Valentine's Day.
He said, "This MAGA country punches me right in the face." So I punched it back. I noticed the rope around my neck and I started screaming.
Why did you hesitate to call the police?
There's a level of pride there. As a gay man, you were considered somehow to be weak, and I'm not weak.
We're going to have William Kelly on the show coming up. He's a radio show host, and he's from Chicago, and he's furious. He said, all the crime that's happening there in Chicago, this is taking away the resources from the true crimes if this was a hoax.
And apparently, I heard Mark Furman last night on the channel say that there were 24 detectives working on this case, which is an extraordinarily large number. Some of the red flags to the cops, law enforcement found it weird that when they interviewed Jussie after the alleged attack, he kept wearing the rope, the noose. They kept it around his neck for 42 minutes after the attack. He did. Also, they found it suspicious that when he took them where the alleged crime happened, he said, "Well, luckily, right behind me, right over there," and he pointed up at a surveillance camera. He said, "Luckily, that camera got it all on tape." And the cops look at it and they go, you know what, that's pointing the other direction. But the brothers did tell, apparently, the grand jury yesterday that they rehearsed it. They went through all sorts of things. Jussie scouted the location, and they rehearsed the attack, so they knew exactly where it would happen.
Meanwhile, Britt Hume sees this collection of incidents, whether it's the Covington kids with the MAGA hats on, whether it's a series of candidates who thirst to call the president a misogynist, a racist, a sexist on a daily, almost an hourly basis. And then this, obviously somebody who spent a great deal of his time campaigning against the president. He says, been very vociferous in my hatred for what he does and what he stands for. This is a scenario in which everybody wants one conclusion. Listen.
There's a real distinction to be made here between the way a lot of the local media out in Chicago handled this and the way the national media handled it. The local media in Chicago did pretty well on this story, and I think the reason was that to them it was a local crime story made into a big story by the fact that we had a celebrity as the alleged victim. The national media, I think, looked at this story and decided it was a Trump story, because in the national media, particularly in Washington, there's only one story all the time, and it's Donald Trump. And to most of them, it's Donald Trump and how awful and dangerous he is. So any story that, alleges that Trump supporters have, in the crudest and most bigoted way have assaulted somebody fits right into their view of Trump and of his supporters.
Well, Jussie Smollett is apparently his legal team is working out a surrender with the police. And, of course, as we said, he'll be in front of a judge today at 1:30 Chicago time.
Right. Meanwhile, on Mic Drop, it is a podcast hosted by an esteemed Navy SEAL who's been featured on 60 Minutes. Larry Logan spoke for 2 hours. But everyone's focused on what this outstanding reporter said about media in America today. There is no standard for journalists. There's only one source for journalists these days. People seem to put opinions when they're supposed to be reporting stories. And she says, I'm committing career suicide when I say this. And that did not stop her from continuing that talk last night on our Prime Time with Sean.
That's right. She was blasting the mainstream media for the media's mob mentality. And she said she's tired of it. That's why she's speaking out. And it could hurt her career. She says it shouldn't. She said, Sean, you know firsthand, they'll come after you and they'll come after anyone who supports a Republican agenda, a conservative agenda. Listen to this.
If there are any independent voices out there, if there are any journalists who are not beating the same drum and giving the same talking points, then we pay the price. They can't take down the substance of what you're saying, right? They can't go after the things that matter. So they smear you personally. They go after your integrity. They go after your reputation as a person and as a professional, and they'll stop at nothing. So, I'm not the only one, and I'm just like, I'm done, right? I'm tired of it. And they don't get to write my story anymore. They don't get to speak for me. I want to say loudly and clearly to anybody who's listening, I am not owned. Nobody owns me.
And essentially what she's saying is, when she says they, she's talking about the 85% of the mainstream media that she says is liberal. 85% registered Democrats. And she said, any journalists who are not beating the same drum, giving the same talking points, we pay the price, she said. Meanwhile, let's talk politics. There's a family feud on the Democrat side.
Oh, gosh. Do you remember when Kamala Harris, she had that radio interview with Breakfast Club? It was released. We talked about it. She admitted that she smoked pot when they asked her if she was pro-legalizing marijuana. She said, of course I smoked marijuana. Half my family's from Jamaica. Are you kidding me? Well, her own father had a problem with that. But listen to what she said on the Breakfast Club.
They say you oppose legalizing weed.
That's not true.
I know.
and look, I joke about it, half joking. Half my family's from Jamaica. Are you kidding me?
Have you ever smoked?
I have.
Okay.
Like I inhale. I did inhale.
Okay.
It's real hysterical for the former attorney general of that state to talk about doing something illegal, laughing about it, giggling about it, and trying to get some traction for it. Among the people that were upset by it, her dad, Donald Harris, from Jamaica, an economics professor at Stanford University, says this: my dear departed grandmothers, as well as my deceased parents, must be turning in their grave right now to see their family's name, reputation, and proud Jamaican identity being connected in any way, jokingly or not, with the fraudulent stereotype of pot-smoking, joy-seeking, and in pursuit of identity politics. Man,
yeah.
What a blast at his daughter who wants to be the next president.
No kidding. He added, and he had sent this statement to Jamaica Global Online. He said, speaking for myself and my immediate Jamaican family, we wish to categorically disassociate ourselves from this travesty. The campaign had no comment as of yesterday. It should be pointed out that Kamala Harris's parents divorced when she was younger, and her mother raised her and her sister.
But her father still had a big part of her life, according to reports.
Today she'll be with Al Sharpton in New York City, trying to do her best to get the African-American vote. And they'll be at Harlem at Sylvia's. So we'll see if she's going to comment on that, going in or out of that restaurant.
People are going to ask her, hey, what's the deal with your dad? So stay tuned for that.
All right, let's hand it over to Jillian, who has some more headlines for us. Hi, Jillian.
That's a good Thursday morning to you. Let's begin with this. A Coast Guard lieutenant accused Duke basketball player's shoe blows out less than a minute into a game. Watch this. Zion Williamson's foot tearing right through his Nike sneaker as he dribbled away from a UNC player. In a statement, Nike says, quote, while this is an isolated occurrence, we are working to identify the issue. The Tar Heel beat top-ranked Duke 88-72. Williamson has a minor knee sprain. He's expected to be the #1 NBA draft pick, but I'm sure he'll be.
Yeah, that is not just that is not just a basketball player. That is a guy that's supposed to be maybe the next LeBron James.
Yeah.
And for him to get hurt in the first minute of the game, that could single-handedly tank Nike's stock.
Well,
I mean,
really?
for the shoe to blow out like that, and for his career to be in jeopardy, that's a sprained
The only way
knee.
this would be worse, and I'm so sorry that he's injured, the way it would be worse if it were like the last point and they needed that as the tiebreaker. Right.
But it's really not about about the game. It's about this guy who probably be one of the richest players in sports shortly.
And suddenly with the video of that shoe blowing up, you're right, Brian. Bad for Nike.
Yep.
They'll do some explaining later today as well. Meanwhile, 6:13 here in New York City, President Trump slamming Andrew McCabe after his media tour.
He really looks to me like sort of a poor man's J. Edgar Hoover. He's I think he's a disaster.
Well, now Missouri Senator Josh Hawley is ready to.
Edgar Hoover. He's I think he's a disaster.
President Trump blasting former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe, who detailed discussions of the ousting of the president during his book tour this past week. Our next guest is now demanding answers from the FBI on what he's calling a disturbing counterintelligence probe. Here to explain, Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who just sent this letter to the FBI Director, Christopher Wray. Senator, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Okay, so were you scratching your head when you heard Mr. McCabe on television talking about, yeah, we were all together, we were sitting there talking about who's in, who's out, who could possibly get rid of the president with the 25th Amendment? These were people at the DOJ and the FBI. The 25th Amendment does not provide for them to be the pickers on who goes.
You know, nor does the Constitution provide for them to be setting the national security or foreign policy of the United States, but yet that seems to be what they think they were doing. I mean, you have Andrew McCabe now admitting that he launched a counterintelligence investigation of the president because he didn't like the president's statements on foreign policy. I tell you what it really sounds like to me, Steve. It sounds like to me the FBI didn't want any oversight. The FBI didn't want to be held accountable. And when the president and others tried to do so, they retaliated against him. So I want to know. I want to hear from the FBI. I want to know who launched this counterintelligence investigation. I want to know why. I want to know who oversaw it. I want to know who was involved with it. And I want to know now.
Sure, absolutely. We all do. Now, it sounds like the Mueller probe, according to some news reports, could be drawing to a conclusion in the next week or two. Are you confident that the Inspector General at the Department of Justice, Michael Horowitz, Mr. Huber, who's been called in to take a look at the DOJ and the FBI, will be able to figure out who the bad actors were during this time?
Well, I hope that the Inspector General's investigation will go on. But look, there's a role here for Congress to exercise oversight. that these agencies, the FBI, needs to be held accountable. I don't want to go back to the day, Steve, when the FBI was collecting information on political leaders, the J. Edgar Hoover days, where they tried to influence the outcome of policy in this country.
Right.
I mean, that's not democracy. So we need to have oversight here. That's why I've demanded answers from the FBI, and I'm willing to take whatever steps are necessary to get those answers.
Right. And before you go, I know you are there in the Judiciary Committee. Have you heard whether or not the Mueller probe is wrapping up?
I have not heard directly. I look forward to it wrapping up. It should have been wrapped up a long time ago. The special counsel needs to bring his evidence forward, if he has any, and let's get on with it. The American people deserve to have this thing wrapped up and over with.
All right. I think a lot of people feel exactly the same way. From the great state of Missouri, Josh Hawley, thank you very much, Senator, for joining us live.
Thank you.
All right, 6:20 now here in New York City. Jussie Smollett expected to face a judge at 1:30 Chicago time. Our next guest was a victim of violent crime and a Chicago native, and says he owes everybody an apology to the city. And Bill, it's February 21st. First up, Virginia Governor Ralph Northam has canceled his racial reconciliation event over student protests. The visit at the Virginia University Union, a historically black college, was the first stop on an apology tour after a racist photograph in his medical school yearbook surfaced. Northam tweeting, he will respect the wishes of the student body. Meanwhile, Nike releases a special edition Colin Kaepernick jersey days after he settled agreements with the NFL. The Kaepernick Icon jersey is $150. The former San Francisco 49ers player gained national attention in 2016 when he refused to stand for the national anthem to protest racism and police brutality. And that is some of the news, Brian and Ainsley.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, we got a Fox News alert. Today in Chicago, Jussie Smollett due in court. The Empire actor now officially indicted on felony charges for filing a false police report, and it could get worse from there. He's alleging a hate crime by Trump supporters.
Our next guest, a Chicago native and violent crime victim himself, says this is my city and Jussie Smollett tried to destroy it, and is now demanding an apology for everyone in his city. Here with more is William Kelly, the host of the Citizen Kelly radio show. Good morning to you, William. Thanks for being on with us.
Thank you, Ainsley. I think I'm being told that this is the first time someone from Chicago has actually been on national TV to talk about Chicago. So we're making history, Ainsley.
All right. Well, get the story straight for us. Why do you want him to apologize to everyone in Chicago?
Well, this is very serious. I know that it's almost become a comedy of errors on the part of Jussie Smollett, which is why actors should never direct. That's the lesson here for actors, number one. But the fact of the matter is that the crime in Chicago was already epidemic. Okay, we had, I think 26 out of 30 murders go unsolved in the city of Chicago since Jussie perpetrated this hoax, allegedly, in my opinion, allegedly. We've had over 106 shootings, 26 murders, and guess how many arrests, Ainsley?
How many?
Six arrests. Okay, the manpower of the Chicago Police Department has been completely misdirected towards solving this hoax, which has created a national firestorm against my city. Okay, the city of Chicago, the city that I was born and raised in, that I love with all my heart, that I was raised to believe was the greatest city in the history of the world. Okay, and whenever I travel now throughout the country, throughout the world, the first thing I hear from people is crime, murder. And now Jussie Smollett. We cannot let this go without an apology and, in my opinion, an arrest, a prosecution, and a punishment. This particular hate hoax has to be atoned for.
And the thing is, it's not about him, it's about others that could falsely do this and the ramifications. Now, you're a repeated victim of violent crime yourself. Now, just so when it comes to Jussie, this easily could have been a race riot. When you talk about they attacked me because I was black, they threw bleach on me, they attacked me because I was gay, they said this is MAGA country. You know, there's people who are already on the edge when they wake up in the morning. All they need is something to set them off.
Exactly right. First of all, the good news is that nobody in Chicago believed this hoax, okay? Because, first of all, anyone who's ever been to Chicago knows This is not MAGA country. Despite all of my efforts on my, the Citizen Kelly radio show, we have not become MAGA country here in the city of Chicago quite yet. Okay, but the combination of first of all, this allegedly took place at 2 a.m. in the morning during a polar vortex, and bleach was allegedly poured over Jussie Smollett's head. Anyone who's been in Chicago for the last month knows that if any liquid was poured over your head, it would be frozen to your face for life, okay? I'm not a detective, but I do know that this hoax did not add up from the word go, not to mention the fact that anyone who's ever been raised in Chicago knows that the fact that nobody was shot during this alleged incident proves right there that this is a hoax.
He kept his Subway sandwich.
Exactly.
He kept his phone.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
All right, William, thank you so much for being on with us.
I'm a little concerned, though, about the Chicago police who actually exposed this hoax, because I'm afraid they might go down in history the way the Watergate, the night security guard at the Watergate Hotel is going to go down in history, because there's more to this hoax. We don't really know the motive, who else is involved, and I think that the Chicago Police Department may have exposed the Democrat, hate crime industrial complex.
Well, see, there might be an accomplice involved. We know that.
He's going to court today.
William Kelly, thanks.
Thank you, William.
Straight ahead, the U.S.-born ISIS bride fled to Syria to help ISIS.
That'll be totally up to him. The new attorney general, yes.
Okay, we got a new attorney general, and he's going to be the decider of when we get to see these things. Judge Andrew Napolitano, senior judicial analyst and the host of Liberty File. Fox Nation joins us live.
Good morning.
We just had Josh Hawley on. He's on the Judiciary Committee. He's only hearing what we're hearing. There are news reports that the Mueller probe could come out next week. But then again, you look at how things line up. We have a new attorney general, Rod Rosenstein, leaving. He had said he was going to oversee it. So what do you think?
I don't think it's going to come out as one report, and I don't think it's going to come out next week. The reason I said I hope it doesn't come out next week is because the President of the United States is 10,000 miles away doing very, very serious work. And I don't think he wants, and the world wants or expects his attention to be diverted to this. The issue is going to be, will the entire report be made public? Chuck Grassley, the former chair of the Judiciary Committee, Republican, has been lobbying that the entire report, whatever is in there, good or bad, the public is entitled to see it. Absolutely. So here's what will happen.
Appropriate redactions aside,
well,
if someone's security is in jeopardy.
Yes. Here's what will happen, though. Once Congress gets its hands on that report, any member of Congress can bring it to the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate and release it with impunity. There's no legal recourse against them.
And it becomes a political document.
Correct. Now, what else is going to happen in the week after next when President Trump is back from Vietnam? Michael Cohen's public testimony.
I thought it was next week.
Oh, excuse me. It is next week. It is while he's away. I'm sorry.
And he can't talk about the case. He's going to talk about what a horrible person Donald Trump is.
This is just a political claptrap. We think. I mean, maybe there's going to be some other allegation. I don't know. Yep. But Mueller's report, in my view, probably will come in stages, and parts of it will be a summary.
Judge, which makes you think that? I just thought, here it is. I'm done.
Because what makes me think that is people that I've been talking to, as well as the fact that there are parts of it that are really not related to other parts. And if Bob Mueller does release the report in 2 weeks and closes down shop, then he's got to pass certain prosecutions, like Roger Stone's. Stone's going to be in court this afternoon.
Trying to stay
onto the task of regular prosecutors.
When DOJ was investigating Hillary Clinton, and James Comey came out and he listed all the things that she had done wrong, all the laws that she had broken, and then he said, but we've decided not to indict her. It's now coming out that the legal counsel there at the FBI or with DOJ, the one who said you can't wiretap, Jim Baker,
right?
He is now coming out and saying his recommendation was, when he read the law, Hillary Clinton did break the law, she should be prosecuted.
It's a recommendation with which I agreed, and we discussed this many times before President Trump was elected. The evidence, in my view, of her guilt is overwhelming. You know, Andrew McCabe, for all of his credibility problems, did say something that was very interesting. I don't know if he said this at the time. There ought to have been a special counsel for Hillary Clinton. It should have been separated from Jim Comey and separated from Loretta Lynch, who had been appointed by Barack Obama.
But, what James Baker went on to say during this closed-door testimony, which now some portions of the Radcliffe interrogation have been released. It shows that James Baker said, yeah, I thought she should be prosecuted until the very end of the process, and I was talked out of it by people at the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Political
I wonder
decision.
who that would be.
Well, of course, we know what happened. They talked him out of wanting her to be indicted because they thought she was going to be president and their boss.
He went on to say that she goes, I ultimately didn't go for it because I couldn't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt the intent to deceive.
You know what? You can infer intent, and besides, there is a portion of that statute, failure to safeguard state secrets, which you can violate by gross negligence.
Right.
And for gross negligence, you don't have to prove intent.
Okay, real quickly,
and Comey knows that.
Chicago, Jussie Smollett, how serious is this?
I think his greater worry is the potential federal prosecution. By mailing a letter to himself, a threatening letter to himself, he committed postal fraud. 5 to 10 years. That's 2 to 3 in jail. That's 2 to 3 times what he faces for lying to the Chicago cops.
He said, and they had the hazmat team there and the resources they needed to secure that environment.
He cost the city and Cook County a fortune in resources and money.
Do we know for sure he wrote that letter?
No, we don't. No, we don't. But the feds are investigating it.
Apparently, yesterday at the grand jury, the brothers said we were not involved in it. But the brothers told him everything else. He said, yeah, he paid us $3,500. He timed it so that we were going to go to Nigeria the next day. They have spilled the beans on it.
I am going to guess he did not tell his own lawyers the truth. If he told his own lawyers the truth, there was a time, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 days ago, they could have gone to the prosecutors and worked at a deal. Now it is too late.
It's so funny you say that because I was wondering, like, how does that conversation go down? You hire your attorney, you say, I didn't do this, I'm accused of this, I didn't do it. Or
but you can see another shelter here. They got the barbed wire. They got them in there. A minimal police presence. It's been pretty quiet all morning. But, you know, there's one of 2 shelters here, more than 1,000 migrants in Ciudad Juarez trying to deal with the numbers that are spilling over into El Paso. Let me just show you those numbers. They are up 478% this year in apprehensions. You've got 43,238 in fiscal year 19 compared to only 7,481 last.
Speakers. In this new book, he's taking a page from West Point and how you can utilize the military academy's 12 core virtues to build leadership skills in yourself and your family, your team, your workplace. The name of the book is Character Carved in Stone. These are the stories of West Point grads, many of which we know of. Pat Williams, welcome back to the couch. Great to see you. How many books have you written now?
This is book 110, believe it or not.
110 books.
Yes.
I love this one. I couldn't put it down, especially when I read the foreword. West Point teaches a lot. The characteristics that are outlined are compassion, courage, dedication, determination, dignity, discipline, integrity, loyalty, perseverance, responsibility, service, and trust. But your foreword is by a graduate of West Point,
Well,
Coach K.
Mike Krzyzewski, the Duke coach, went to West Point. He wrote the foreword for us, and he's one of the featured people that we write about in the book. I went up to speak at West Point, Brian, a few years ago to the teams and the coaches. They gave me a little tour of the campus, and we came to a little park called Trophy Point, and I looked around and I saw these benches there. Counted them, there were 12, and at the end of each bench, carved into the stone, was a word, a different word on each bench. And I went and looked at all of them, and the words that you just read are what are on the benches. And I said,
seeing that?
I said, boy, that's got well-kept secret. I never had heard of that. And then I thought, these are the principles they want the cadets to follow. I said, I think that's got a book in it. So.
Right, and to help everybody who isn't lucky enough to get a nomination to get in, Coach K in particular is known for his character. He says the best movie ever made, even though everybody was recruiting him, was when Bobby Knight came to his house, talked Polish to his mother, and convinced Coach K to become Mike Krzyzewski to go to West Point. He says best move ever, and
Mike,
really affected his life.
Mike would tell you that. He said his years at West Point were life-changing. One of the principles that we write about here is responsibility. As a freshman, Coach K was walking across the campus. He got mud and dirt splashed on his shoes. An officer stopped him, challenged him. Mike tried to excuse his way out. And he was told, at West Point, there are 3 answers when you're challenged. Yes, sir. No, sir. No excuse, sir.
Gotcha.
And Coach K learned from that I am responsible.
And man, is he paid off. Matthew Ridgway, you say, is a great example, the legendary officer of loyalty.
Well, on D-Day, Matthew Ridgway, the general, parachuted behind Nazi lines into France with his troops.
The probe could be released as soon as next week.
Well, the special counsel needs to bring his evidence forward, if he has any, and let's get on with it. The American people deserve to have this thing wrapped up and over with.
The woman from Alabama who left to join ISIS and marry an Islamic State fighter will not be getting her wish to return to the United States.
The attorney representing the Covington Catholic student says Nicholas Sandmann's image is tarnished.
The way the media portrayed him as literally the face of evil, because he was white, he was Catholic, and he was wearing a Make America Great Again cap.
Samsung, they have been teasing this foldable phone for a while, and we are finally lured a price tag. Get this, $1,980.
Let's get right to a Fox News alert. The Empire actor Jussie Smollett is now in police custody.
This just happened. The actor is under arrest hours after Chicago police named him an official suspect in the alleged hate crime against him, himself. He's charged with making false statements to police, which could result in prison time.
All right, let's go out to Chicago right now, where Matt Finn is waiting with a thorough report. Matt, we understand that apparently there's going to be a press conference at 10 o'clock Eastern time, and then he, Mr. Smollett, will be at a bond hearing at 1:30, right?
Yep, and that's correct. Chicago police confirming that right now Jussie Smollett is in the custody of Chicago police detectives. And Chicago police say their detectives testified yesterday before a grand jury to get these charges approved, as did the Osundario brothers. They testified for 2.5 hours yesterday before the grand jury. And new surveillance video shows the Osundario brothers apparently buying the supplies to carry out this attack: black masks and red hats, with which Jussie Smollett allegedly told them to purchase. Now, the attorney for the Osundario brothers says the brothers did get some type of money from Smollett, but, quote, not in the narrative that's out there. The attorney says the brothers do not have a plea deal or immunity. They were cooperating because they wanted to reveal their truth. The brothers' attorney also praises Chicago police.
When I say that the police spent countless man-hours trying to piece this together, I mean that. I absolutely mean that. When I say that my clients spent countless hours getting their story out there to the police so that they could do their work, I mean that too.
Smollett's attorney released a statement reading, quote, "Like any other citizen, Mr. Smollett enjoys the presumption of innocence, particularly when there has been an investigation like this one where information, both true and false, has been repeatedly leaked. Given these circumstances, we intend to conduct a thorough investigation to mount an aggressive defense." Right now, the attorney for the Osundario brothers says she does not expect her clients to be charged. Brian, Ainsley, Steve.
All right, Matt, thank you very much. So what we understand, TMZ's got a report this morning that talks a little bit about what the brothers did tell the grand jury. And keep in mind, then the grand jury handed out the indictment, and that's why he was arrested this morning. Apparently, the two brothers said they staged the hate attack. Jussie orchestrated it. They did get paid for it, didn't specify in the news article how much. They drove with him to scout the location. They rehearsed the attack, and as he said during that report, they were seen on camera buying ski masks and red hats and bandanas, and Jussie told the brothers exactly what to buy.
Well, we had
it is right there.
Judge Napolitano on earlier, and he said what Jussie Smollett really needs to worry about are the federal charges against him, because he originally allegedly sent himself that letter
through the federal
mail, and that is a hefty crime, he said, or that is a hefty sentence, up to 20 years, I think he said. But the felony charge, which was the local police's charge, up to 3 years in prison, 1 to 3 years.
Right. I mean, or he could get probation, depending on how this whole thing shakes out. I know in there was powder. They had to call a hazmat team and ended up being crushed aspirin. He could have upwards of $25,000 in fines, 1 to 3 years. But the question is, what was behind it? Why did he actually think he could pull this off? And if you're Good Morning America and he calls and reaches out because he wants to tell his story, do you feel almost victimized? Because he's sitting there putting on his best acting face, allegedly, talking about how he was hit, and he just wants everyone to know how he fought back. That was the only thing he wanted to know. And he just bragged about the fact that everybody knows I'm in very anti-Trump. And there is some pictures of him with Kamala Harris and so many others like Cory Booker have weighed in immediately condemning the climate in this country. Judge Napolitano was with us and told us where this could be going.
Cost the city and Cook County a fortune and resources and money. I am going to guess he did not tell his own lawyers the truth. If he told his own lawyers the truth, there was a time, maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 days ago, they could have gone to the prosecutors and worked at a deal. Now it is too late.
There also is a story that at the 11th hour, just before the two brothers were going to testify in front of the grand jury, apparently Smollett's attorneys called the prosecutors and said, hey, we've got exculpatory evidence that could change the whole story. We don't know what that was, but obviously it did not because he has been indicted. The judge was just talking about the resources involved. Mark Furman said last night on our channel that something like 24 different detectives were involved in this case. And here's a soundbite from a guy in Chicago, the executive director of Violence Interrupters, and he said those assets, those resources were taken away from other really important crimes.
I was born and raised in Chicago, and I know violence quite well here in Chicago, so I was one of the first community leaders that put this out on one of my LinkedIn posts. I wrote a post about it because nobody really, if you get beat up for real in Chicago, nobody gets pimp slapped in Chicago, nobody gets a pass, in other words. Making a comment about Chicago being Make America Great Again country, that does not happen in Chicago. He's receiving all the attention, and we just had a 1-year-old child, a toddler shot in the head named Baby Chase, and he's not getting any attention, and we have a 14 to 16% homicide clearance rate, and if Jesse is guilty of the charges, he's dead wrong because he's taking much needed attention from a serious problem in Chicago.
Absolutely. I wonder who makes that decision to put that much time and effort and resources into a celebrity accusation when there's so many other murders in, I guess, less affluent
not only
areas.
taking attention away from the people who really need the attention and fighting the real crime that's there, if this is a made-up story, then I think he should pay the city back. He should be made to pay the city back because it was very expensive for them to do all these investigations. 24 different detectives?
Well, you know what? He's a high-profile guy. It's Empire is a big show on a big network, filmed in Chicago, and he's a star.
Think about how this could have blown up. Like you mentioned, it could have caused riots.
No kidding.
Well, had it not, but it was determined that it was not a true story because there were some red flags out there. Right. But when you saw him on GMA 1 week ago today, he made the case with all of his heart that he was the victim of a hate crime. Watch this.
He said, this MAGA country punches me right in the face. So I punched it back. I noticed the rope around my neck and I started screaming.
Why did you hesitate to call the police?
There's a level of pride there. As a gay man, you were considered somehow to be weak, and I'm not weak.
Kept a noose around his neck. Who
What would a
keep their noose
psychiatrist
around
say
their neck?
about this? Why would anyone do this? Why would they go to this extreme?
Right. And was there anybody else involved? They're looking into whether an
But
accomplice.
he has a wonderful career. This is not like a guy who needed the attention. He's a famous actor.
Right, but one of the initial stories was he was going to be written out of Empire. Then Fox came back and said, look, he's going to be with us. We love him. One of the red flags they were talking about regarding the news, 42 minutes. It's like that was one of the first things. When cops arrived to talk to him, he was still wearing the noose. I mean, if somebody put a noose around your neck, wouldn't you take it off pretty much immediately? Right. The other one was he took the cops to the location and he said, well, it happened right here. And luckily, there's a surveillance camera right there. The cops all thought that's weird that he would see that. And they go, you know what? That's pointing the other way. The brothers did tell, apparently, the grand jury that they rehearsed it. So was that spot selected because it was under that camera? And at that point, he didn't know it was pointing the other way.
Right, maybe he was the one who twisted it the other way while he staged the whole thing. Who knows? Meanwhile, 9 minutes after the hour, I don't know if you heard, but the Democrats weren't too thrilled with the president's announcements last Thursday, declaring a state of emergency so he can continue building the wall and repurposing some money.
They didn't like that?
Up to 8. Yeah, it turns out, I have sources. It goes up to $8 billion. Today, to the credit of four House Democrats, they're going down to the border themselves. My hope is this isn't staged. They get to see how bad situations are and what the resources actually needed down there. And there are the 4 Dems that are going down. Of course, Benny Thompson is chairman of Homeland Security. So my hope is that he goes there with an open mind and open ears and listens to Border Patrol.
People have been calling on Nancy Pelosi to go down there to the border. So good for those Democrats for going down there, talking to the border agents. Maybe they'll find out, what they really need. Many of them are saying they really do need that wall. Joaquin Castro, he introduced this legislation that is will go before the House tomorrow. And then Nancy Pelosi sent letters to every single person in the House, Democrats and Republicans, saying, please, if you want to sign on to this legislation, please do so.
Remember, it was just a week or two ago when they were going to have the big vote. And they said, the Democrats said, we got to hear from the experts. They heard from the experts. They all said, we need a wall. And then they voted against the wall.
If they vote against the emergency declaration, then it still goes to the president's desk and he could veto it. And probably
for the resolution.
Yeah.
But the big question is, what would the Senate do? And the Senate probably would not pass it. So stay tuned for that.
Okay.
Meanwhile, 7-Eleven here in New York City.
Jillian has some headlines for us. Hi.
That's right. Good morning to you. Let's start off with this. A Coast Guard lieutenant accused of plotting a mass domestic terror attack is due in court today. Prosecutors say Christopher Paul Hassan had a hit list of possible targets, including Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein will make his first public appearance today since word got out that he's stepping down. Rosenstein is scheduled to speak at his alma mater, the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. He's expected to leave his post at the DOJ by mid-March. And everyone holding their breath after the nation's best basketball prospect's shoe blows out. Look at that, less than a minute into a game. Zion Williamson's foot tearing right through his Nike sneaker as he dribbled away from a UNC player. In a statement, Nike says, quote, while this is an isolated occurrence, we are working to identify the issue. The Tar Heels beat top-ranked Duke 88-72. Williamson has a minor knee sprain. He's expected to be the #1 NBA draft pick.
Yeah, they say Knicks fans were worried because the Knicks have the worst team in basketball, and theoretically they'd have more.
But Bernie's campaign says the feds have closed the investigation and are not filing any charges. Here with more is Vermont lawyer and Republican Vice Chair Brady Tensing joins us today from D.C. Brady, good morning to you.
Good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so the college closed with a crushing weight of debt because she bought, in part, 32 acres to expand the college. Took out $6.7 million in tax-exempt loans. What's your problem with that? It sounds like she was just trying to grow things bigger.
Yeah, I don't have a problem. I like bigger things, and I like successful businesses, and I understand there's risk. But there's also something called bank fraud. And what happened was that Jane Sanders misrepresented, lied about confirmed contributions to the school in order to get the bank loan to buy this property.
How did she lie?
Well, she overstated the contributions, and we know this because we know this for at least 3 reasons. One, the school is only able to collect about 25% of the claimed contributions. Number 2, the school's own audit report showed the fraud. And number 3, donors came forward to say that their pledges were overstated, that they were misrepresented.
Now, as I understand it, a couple of years ago, you actually you sent a letter to the feds and said, hey, you got to look into this. What happened with that?
Well, we don't know officially what happened with that because the federal officials don't discuss investigations and they don't discuss closing investigations. But Bernie Sanders' office has claimed that it was closed without prosecution. But this is the shame of this, Steve. If that is exactly what happened, there's not going to be a special prosecutor's report that comes out and explains exactly what role Senator Sanders played in getting this loan or what evidence was in front of the prosecutors that they declined to go forward on. We just have Senator Sanders, who refused to answer questions during the investigation because the investigation was going on, and now he refuses to answer questions because it's closed.
Okay. We got a statement from Jeff Weaver, senior advisor to Bernie Sanders in 2020. These false allegations began with a politically motivated complaint by Trump's 2016 Vermont chairman. As Jane has said from the beginning, she has done nothing wrong and was pleased that the investigation came to an end months ago. It's no coincidence that after Bernie Sanders' record-breaking fundraising during the first day of his campaign, Fox News is regurgitating false attacks from Trump's cronies. The worry was that ultimately they just got a sweetheart deal because she was Bernie's wife, right?
Well, there's not only the worry, there's evidence. If she'd been Jane Doe instead of Jane Sanders, she never would have gotten this loan. It never would have survived the most basic of underwriting. The subsequent president, who was tasked with trying to clean up Jane's mess and trying to save the college, herself said that it appears as though the senator that the school received special treatment, Jane received special treatment because of Senator Sanders' power in the state.
Okay. Nonetheless, the feds did not prosecute, and we don't know exactly why. But Brady, thank you very much for joining us from D.C. and telling us the story.
Thank you.
All right. All right, 7:20 now here in New York City. Some Catholic foster care centers are being targeted over their faith. One leader who fought back and won, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, just donated a portion of her salary to. One recipient is the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, which benefits historically black colleges and universities. It's unclear how much she has donated in all. Meanwhile, $15.5 million. That's how much the Republican National Committee raised just last month. Campaign finance documents show the RNC has nearly $29 million as it prepares for 2020. And finally, $399,000. That's the fine California must pay after trying to force pro-life centers to promote abortion. The Supreme Court struck down the law requiring clinics to post signs about those abortions. All right, some of the news, Brian.
All right, Steve. Faith-based foster care providers fighting for religious freedom after a new federal law waiver allows them to keep working with couples who stick to traditional Christian beliefs.
Left-wing groups are outraged. The Center for American Progress arguing this weaponizes our nation's right to religious freedom in order to justify discrimination in the foster care system, depriving children of welcoming homes. Reed Lehman is CEO of Miracle Hill Ministries, and he joins us now from South Carolina to react. Good morning to you. Thanks for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Tell us about your ministry and your program, please.
Miracle Hill is organized around a mission that homeless children and adults receive food, shelter,